All right, everyone. Here we are again. It is Saturday night, and we are so excited to be here and to be engaging with you tonight. It is so much fun and such a privilege and honor to be able to do this every week for our audience here. I am going to, as you guys know, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be discussing and looking at the issue of race and inequality in America, our part two of this series. I want to, however, as you guys know, we are going to be having a game and getting engaged in some fun stuff before we begin. So welcome to Change with Ted Williams, everyone. Remember, change starts with you. I want to say before we start as well, I'm so grateful to everyone who came out virtually, if you will, this week to support us in our 1619 actual performance, our first performance since the pandemic hit. We did a 50-minute version of the show on the House of Hope's Wednesday night broadcast. Salem Baptist Church on the South Side, they use WJYS, and also they stream on Facebook and YouTube. And we had a very, very large audience. We were very grateful, very excited. And we are looking forward to doing a similar program, if you will, in August and some other times throughout the summer. So having said all that, I am grateful to be here and grateful to welcome our guests back. We've got, actually, do me a favor, you guys. I would like for you to just go around and reintroduce yourselves to our audience before we start our actual game here. So I'm going to go Connie, Matt, Clive, and Diane. And just give us your name again and just a word or two about what it is that you're doing and why you're here. Connie?
I'm Connie Mixon. I'm a professor of political science and director of the Urban Studies program at Elmhurst College. I was a former faculty member and dean at the City Colleges of Chicago, where I got to know Ted quite well. I worked on WYCC, the professors with him, and I'm the author of 21st Century Chicago.
Yeah, Matt Tebbe. I am the co-founder of Gravity Leadership, which is a leadership coaching and consulting organization. We work primarily with churches, and I also co-pastor a church here in Indianapolis area, Indiana, called The Table. And I've got two great kids who are 11 and 8 and may barge in at any moment because, you know, quarantine's got us all crazy. So it's good to be with you, Ted. Good to be back with you.
My name is Clive Cragen. I have spent the last 30 years living and working in the inner city of Chicago, first at a youth ministry, then involved in church planning, and last 13 years teaching at Moody Bible Institute. Currently, I'm not teaching, looking for work. I'm an adoptive father, so we have a transracial family, and but I was born in South Africa, so I've got an interesting journey.
And I'm Diane Elson Miller. I live in the Logan Square neighborhood of Chicago. Have been doing community development work for about 30 years, affiliated with Christian Community Development Association. And our family has committed as a family lifestyle to live our life fully in socioeconomic blended community.
Very good. Thank you all so much. Which, it's so funny you say that, Diane. We'll get into this in a second. On the surface, that doesn't sound radical. And when you unpack that, it's in America, that is extremely radical, and so I'd love to hear more about that in a second. Okay. But before we do that, let's play our trivia game. So remember, the guests, you guys get to play, but not officially. And we have giveaways and that sort of thing. So if we are ready to go, I think actually, Matt, someone said they lost a little bit of your audio. So just if there's anything you can adjust there. I got someone that said that. And hi, everyone, Nicole and Cliff and those guys. Okay, so here we go, folks. Question number one. Remember, type your answer into the into the chat box. And the first person that appears on my screen to get that will get the point. All right, here we go. 10 questions. And I know we are competing now with, it's funny because when we started the show, we were all fully doing quarantine. And the world is changing quickly. And so, I was joking with someone last week that says, hey, the coronavirus is just over in America, right? I mean, it's like the summer's hit, the weather's got nice, and the coronavirus is over, which is tragic, which is partially comic and very much tragic on the other end. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so question number one. Okay. This week in the news, this state decided to remove a reference to plantations from all of its official name, from its official name on all state documents. What state is this? Which state will remove a reference to plantations from its official name on all state documents? Was it Delaware, Maryland, Rhode Island, or Virginia? Delaware, Maryland, Rhode Island, or Virginia? Okay, I'm looking for answers in the comment section. Please, guys, we got lots of cool giveaways. So, I know we've got, I hope Cliff is watching today. Cliff won last week. I think Regina Kreider won the week before, and we've had some really good battles here. And so let's hopefully we get some good stuff going here. So, okay, so remember, which state will remove a reference to plantations from its official name on all state documents? Delaware, Maryland, Rhode Island, or Virginia? Let's see what we got here in the comments section. Okay. Anybody here think they know, actually, by the way? Not this one? Okay, that's cool. That's a pretty tough question, actually. I know the answer to it. I had to look it up, Okay, I'm not sure what's going on here, but we may not have any comments going yet. So I am going to actually let the audience member. Oh, okay. All right. Hey, Walter. Walter put Virginia. Okay. Nicole Larson put Virginia. Anybody else here? Let's see. Virginia. I've got a couple of Virginias in here. The correct answer, ladies and gentlemen, is actually Rhode Island. Rhode Island. Did you know that, Matt? You're shaking your head. You know that, Matt? Okay, cool. Okay. So Matt has a point among our guests. Anybody else on the panel think they got that one? Okay, yeah. So I didn't know this, but Rhode Island is officially known as Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. It'll no longer. This is all from a couple news sources. So you've got the New York Times, and there's a couple other sources that I use for this. They will no longer include the latter half of their name on state documents and websites, according to an executive order announced by the governor on Monday. And of the 13 colonies, actually, Rhode Island was the first to officially end slavery, which is interesting. Okay, total side note there. Okay, cool. All right, here we go. Next question. All right, this week in the news, a Washington state woman used her $1,200 stimulus check to buy what? 1,200 face masks, a new television, or lasagna for her whole neighborhood? 1,200 face masks, a new TV, or lasagna for her whole neighborhood? What did she use her stimulus check to buy, folks? Here we go. Okay, we got some answers popping in here. Okay, we got some answers popping in here. Okay. Here we go. We got some answers popping in here, folks. Okay, we got Nicole put mask. Walter put lasagna. Do I have anybody else on this? Okay, I'm going to give this one, folks, ladies and gentlemen. Walter actually gets this one. She spent her money buying lasagna for the whole neighborhood. Lasagna. So we've got, first question was, who got that first one right? Oh, nobody got that one right. Okay. And number 2, Walter got that one right. Okay, next question. Okay, so Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York City announced that New York this week will instigate a crackdown on what? Marijuana, electric bicycles, fireworks, or racist symbols? Marijuana, electric bicycles, fireworks, or racist symbols? This week, Mayor de Blasio said there will be a crackdown throughout the city on one of these 4 items: marijuana, electric bicycles, fireworks, or racist symbols? What do we have? How many of you guys got that last one right, by the way? Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, it requires no expertise, whatever, right? That was a total luck question. So, okay, here we go. Nicole put racist symbols throughout the city, okay? Here we go. Who else? Gotta get some more on this in the comment section. Come on, folks. Where are we? We got racist symbols from Nicole. I'm waiting. Where's some of my usual people here tonight? I guess they might be out partying tonight. Okay, Walter put electric bicycles, okay? And Eva, hey, what's up, Eva? Eva from WYCC, how you doing, Eva? Eva is on, yes. Eva put fireworks, and Shannon put fireworks. And Tanisha said, hello, Professor. Hello, Tanisha, but that's not the right answer. But hello, Tanisha. The correct answer is fireworks, and Shannon is on the board. We have Walter with 1 point and Shannon with 1 point. New York is cracking down on fireworks. Next question here, folks. Next question. Okay. Which country passed 1 million coronavirus cases last Friday, becoming the second country in the world to do that after the United States? Which country passed 1 million coronavirus cases this Friday, becoming the second country to do so after the United States? Was it India, Mexico, Brazil, or Russia? India, Mexico, Brazil, or Russia? All right, Shannon's popped in. Tanisha's popped in. Got an answer there for them as well. We got Nicole with an answer. Guess, what do you guys think it is?
Brazil.
You think it's Brazil? Diane, what do you think it is? Anybody else? Want to take a guess? Okay, Connie's going to say Brazil. Matt, what are you saying?
Brazil.
Matt, okay, all right. So, okay, here the correct answer is, ladies and gentlemen, it is Brazil. It is Brazil. It looks like Tanisha got that one right. So congratulations, Tanisha. Tanisha's on the board. We got Walter 1 point, Shannon 1 point, and Tanisha with 1 point. Here we go. Okay. I don't know if we're gonna get to 10. I don't know how many questions I have. I just have a bunch of questions. So we'll see what happens. Maybe get to 7 or so like that. Oh, here's another fun one. Okay. Which actor is in talks right now which actor is in talks right now to be the next person to play Batman? Okay, which actor is in talks right now to become the next person to play Batman? Is it Michael Keaton again, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, or Idris Elba? Which person is in talks to be the next person to play Batman? Is it Michael Keaton again? Is it Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or Idris Elba? Shannon's in there quick on this one, boy. I tell you, Shannon. Okay, Shannon's got it real quick here. Alrighty. I'll wait for a few more. Okay. Okay, so Shannon put Michael Keaton. Nicole put The Rock. Eva put Michael Keaton. Walter put Idris Elba. Tanisha Ricketts put Michael Keaton. Okay, so you guys know this one? Anybody? Say okay. All right. So the correct answer on this one, actually, ladies and gentlemen, is Michael Keaton again. I know, right? Yeah. Well, The Rock can't even fit in the suit, guys. I mean, come on, he's too big, He don't even look right. He kind of walking around, He's just, and Idris Elba's going to be, they're looking at him and potentially play James Bond was kind of the conversation there. So he can't do James Bond and Batman. I mean, my goodness, well, maybe he could. I don't know. All right. And it looks like Shannon got that one right. So Shannon is on the board again. She has 2, Walter has 1, and Tanisha has 1. Here we go. President Trump. Can't have a news trivia game without talking about our favorite president here. President Trump just said what in an interview with Sean Hannity this week about the possibility of his second term? Okay? He said that Joe Biden may win, that there's no way he will lose, or that he is going to build a second wall. Okay? So, Joe Biden may win. He is definitely going to win, or he'll build a second wall. Okay. All right, folks. It looks like we got some answers on the board. Anybody want to answer that one? I know Connie knows this one. Connie is like, you are a straight news junkie. Okay, you ever heard this one? Yeah, well, this actually. Okay. Yeah, so hopefully, I had to verify. I actually listened to his words because I saw the story and I was like, this can't be right, and I actually read it. So he actually, and it looks like I'll give you the answer. Actually, Shannon got that one right. He actually said that Joe Biden may win. He said because there are people that don't love him in this country. You know, listen to the interview. Yeah, it was yesterday. He goes, he says, Joe Biden may actually win. There are people that love me in this country, and how can he be your president? He can't even talk. This is basically how the interview went with Sean Hannity. So, okay, there you go. We can't explain that. So Shannon is actually killing. Shannon's got 3 here, and Walter's got that right as well. But it looks like that Shannon, I don't know, quick internet, I guess, right? So, okay, so all right, here we go. Next question. Which of the following states has not seen a rise in coronavirus cases this week? Which of the following states has not seen a rise in coronavirus cases this week? Is it Florida, Arizona, New York, or Texas? Florida, Arizona, New York, or Texas? I think this is a pretty easy one, actually. I think, you had to throw a couple of softballs out there for folks. Okay. Florida, New York, Arizona, or Texas? Okay. And Eva's on the board, and Shannon's on the board. And it looks like, and Nicole is congratulating Shannon. Okay. And Walter's on the board as well. Tanisha's on the board as well. It looks like Eva got it first. The correct answer is New York. Very good, guys. Very good. Okay, very good. It looks like we may have 2 more questions here. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. Never mind. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead here. All right. A statue in New York City will be removed from the entrance to the American Museum of Natural History this week. In New York City, a statue will be removed from the entrance to the American Museum of Natural History. This statue depicts which historic figure? Is it Andrew Jackson, Robert E. Lee, or Theodore Roosevelt? Andrew Jackson, Robert E. Lee, or Theodore Roosevelt? This statue in front of the American Museum of Natural History in New York, they just decided they're going to remove it this week. Andrew Jackson, Robert E. Lee, or Theodore Roosevelt? Tanisha, quickly. Eva, you guys are getting faster now. This is getting a little more competitive here, okay? All right, so we got Teddy. Nicole put Teddy. Walter put Teddy. Eva put Lee. Tanisha put Roosevelt. Shannon put Roosevelt. And it looks like the correct answer actually is Roosevelt. And it looks like Tanisha got that one right. She got it in first, so very good, Tanisha. Good job. Yeah, actually, that statue, which we've probably seen, has both an African slave and a Native American on that basically standing behind him on his horse, supporting him, and de Blasio is going to get rid of it. So good for them. Good for them. Okay, next question. Joel Schumacher, the director, who gave us St. Elmo's Fire and the 80s movie The Lost Boys, died on Monday at age 80. He also directed this big budget film that he later apologized for. Was it Cats, Batman and Robin, Howard the Duck, or The Last Airbender? Cats, Batman and Robin, Howard the Duck, or The Last Airbender? He did apologize for this film. So, I guess you could apologize for any of those films, by the way, honestly. All right, it looks like Shannon is in first. Let's see if we got any other answers in there. All right, panelists, what do you guys think?
Last Airbender.
Last Airbender, okay. Anybody else? Okay. I'm going to give a chance for at least one more answer in there. Third title, I said we had Cats, Batman and Robin, Howard the Duck, or The Last Airbender. I'm going to give at least one more. Shannon's got an answer in here. Let's see. I'm going to give a chance for a few more other folks to pop in here. Okay. Anyone? Going once? Going twice? And okay, I don't see anybody else's answers in here. Don't know what's going on. I don't know. Okay, there we go. Okay, Tanisha's in there as well. Okay, so the correct answer, ladies and gentlemen, is Batman and Robin. It is Batman and Robin. And yes, and it looks like Shannon got that one right. Actually, Howard the Duck, by the way, is one of my favorite 80s movies now that I think about it. I didn't realize this, but I have this 80s nostalgia. Ralph Racine, no, just said it was an awful movie. Shame on you, Ralph. We are no longer friends, Ralph, okay? Ralph's a buddy of mine from Arizona, and he just assaulted me by saying Howard the Duck was an awful movie. Shame on you, Ralph. I love that movie. A lot of cheesy 80 movies I loved back in the day. So, okay. That is it. All right, Shannon has it. And actually, I have... Ralph. Okay. Last question, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be it. This will be... Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I think we lost somebody here. I think we lost Clyde for a second. I'm not sure. Okay, actually, we just lost... okay, we lost Matt. All right, Matt is back. There we go. Cool. Okay. Actually, I don't like our last... Let me see. Okay, I'm sorry. No. Last question. Okay, last question here. Give me 1 second, folks. And we will give you the last question. Okay, last question. The VP race. Okay? Which of the following is not one of the final candidates for Joe Biden's VP pick? Okay? Which of the following is not one of the final candidates for Joe Biden's VP pick? Is it Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, or Kamala Harris? Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, or Kamala Harris? Which of the following is not in the running for the VP position? This is question number 10, folks. Walter's got an answer. Nicole's got an answer. And Nicole, I like you because I see how you decided to spell Amy rather than trying to spell Klobuchar, which is you're a smart woman. Okay. Eva's got an answer. The correct answer, ladies and gentlemen, is Amy Klobuchar. She did drop out of the race. And it looks like the first person to get that was Walter. And that is it for our 10 questions. So out of our 10 questions, no one got number 1. We've got Walter has 1. We have Shannon 2, 3, 4. I know actually Walter may have 2 here. Shannon has 4. It actually looks like, yeah, Shannon got that last one. Shannon, you are a winner clearly here. Walter has 2. Shannon has 4. You killed today, Shannon. Tanisha has 2. Good job, everybody. Congratulations. Shannon, please send me a message, a private message, and I will send you one of my 1619 paraphernalia pieces. I've got T-shirts. I got books that I wrote, all this other kind of stuff. I'll send you one of those. Please send me your information in the private into my send me a message, okay? Thank you so much for playing, you guys. Let's go ahead and talk about what is going on in the world. Once again, you guys, this is part 2 of a conversation I think is extremely important. A couple weeks ago, I had this group of panelists who were talking about race and inequality. I really wanted to do this kind of conversation because I do a lot of talks around race and inequality. And if you haven't noticed, I'm African American, okay? And so I get asked about these issues a lot. I talk about them a lot, but I'm really convinced that I don't know necessarily that the onus is on people of color to be facilitating and engaging and discussing these issues at the forefront, sort of being the leaders on these issues. And so here we are with a group of people who are obviously not people of color in that way, or would not identify as people of color, and who are here to talk about issues of white privilege, who are here to talk about issues of systemic racism. We had a wonderful, wonderful time with them a couple weeks ago. They were fantastic, and I just was so encouraged and blessed by what you all had to share. I want to start the conversation with what is happening since George Floyd. If you have not noticed, I have, and I'm sure you guys have as well, that for a slim moment, a short moment in America, we were all kind of on the same page. You can get universal support for this idea that what happened to George Floyd was an injustice and that we had to do something. And then immediately, within, I would say, the course of a couple of days, the riots began to happen, and you saw the public, at least particularly the white public primarily, more conservative public, begin to shift their conversation towards people who were looting and rioting and that sort of thing. I thought this was a special moment in America. Is it still one? And what do we need to do to capture this moment if it is not? Because this issue of race, I think, is it's tearing us apart. And I want to talk to you and see what you think about the moment that we're in right now. So anyone, please hop in on that one.
Yeah.
Was that a tough question?
I hope we're not out of that moment. One of the things that I've tried to point out to white colleagues and acquaintances who talked about the riots is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has a great quote about riots. He says that I think America must see riots do not develop out of thin air. In the final analysis, the riot is the language of the unheard. What is it that America has failed to hear? And I think I know we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we haven't heard? I do fear there are loud voices, particularly in conservative media. And those of us who care about race and progressive issues, we have to be as loud, and we have to think about the narratives and the frame within which we advance our agenda towards racial equity. So I hope that we haven't lost this moment. And I think, having watched these types of protests before, is we are seeing engagement, and we're seeing engagement at a bunch of levels. And I think a key demographic, both in the 2018 election and in the 2020 election, is white suburban women. I'm not a suburban woman, but women that look like me are starting to care about these issues, and they're mad as hell. So if we can keep them engaged, I think that's important as well. So I hope we're not.
Does this moment feel different to any of you, any of the other panelists? Clive, go ahead. Yeah.
I couldn't
Clive,
hear you, Ted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Can you hear me now, Clive? Can anyone hear me? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I can
All
hear
right.
you, Ted.
Okay,
Yeah,
you want
I
to
can
answer the
now.
question? Okay. Clive, go ahead. Okay. If Clive may not be able to hear me, Matt, you want to answer the question for me? Does this moment feel different to you?
Ted, I hope it is. I feel. Can you guys hear me okay? Because there was some problem
Hear you,
earlier.
Matt.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. I really hope it is, Ted, because I think that we're past what outrage can do, and we need a sustained presence seeking racial justice and equality in our culture. I think a few things I'm noticing. I'm noticing some older white people in my life, basically baby boomers. And I know a number, like not more than a few, who for the first time are acknowledging their racist ideas and their complicity and cooperation with racist systems and structures. And it's almost like they're shocked by it. It's like for the first time. So I see that happening. I will say I'm concerned. I think you're right, Ted. I don't think this should all fall on the Black and African American and BIPOC community. I think that white people invented race. It's our job to dismantle it. But the problem is we don't have centuries of organizing, mobilizing, creating, agitating for change at the grassroots level that marginalized people in America do. And a white rage isn't going to fix this problem.
No.
Like we can't just show up at the Apple store and lose our biscuit and get a free iPhone. And that's kind of what we do, right? We call Delta and we blast them for our bad flight and we get a free ticket, or we go to the Apple store, we go to Trader Joe's or whatever. And it's going to take a sustained focus. And that's my question. I don't know if white people, if we have the capacity to sustain the energy needed to dismantle white supremacy. I don't know if you all have thoughts about that.
I would also say I have a real big concern about the church, because the church has never led in this. The church has participated in racism. And so you're not getting, especially because of patriarchal culture, you're not getting these guys stepping up and say, okay, we're going to address this. We're going to do small groups. We're going to read a book together and have a conversation. I really have spent my time talking to the demographic that Connie called out. I really think it's going to be the white women that are going to step up, because women are caretakers. They're way more lateral than men. And I just think they're the ones that are going to have to do this with the way they're wired emotionally, with the head-heart connection, to transform. And it takes one conversation at a time. But it is frustrating because white church has never really addressed justice. And there's all sorts of disconnects. I mean, I don't even use the term social justice at church. I just flat out call it biblical justice. But that is the only white group that's really organized, and they're lacking at large in so many ways.
Yeah, I think I hope. Can everybody hear me? I'm having some technology problems, so you won't see my face. I'm not sure what happened, but I have noticed two things. One, I was at a wedding for my niece last weekend in central Indiana, and she'd had her and my cousin, not my niece, my nephew and his fiance, and then my niece, and then they were all participating in protests in small towns in Indiana. Then it was like 5 or 6 of them.
Wow.
But she ended up uninviting some family members from the wedding who were, from her perspective, racist, because I was bringing my youngest children who were African American there. And also had a conversation with another really close relative who, for the first time in 30 years, asked the question of my wife, am I a racist? And so I'm hopeful, but I don't know. I think I would, Matt, I don't know if we have the staying power.
Ted, you know what I'm reminded of as I listen to that comment? One of the things that turned the civil rights movement in the 1960s was in Birmingham when Bull Connor turned hoses and dogs on black children. And it was that kind of gripped the conscience of America, and it's just where we were. It's a sad commentary. You can have dogs on black adults, but black kids, that's different, right? And so, and so that sort of moved people. And I wonder, Ted, if it will take police brutality of somebody that looks like me or Connie and so then white people wake up to the fact that this is the police are a force that is with out of control violence that impacts white people too. I wonder if it will take something like that to push things over the top. I don't know.
So
I think that that is having an impact. The question is whether how far that will go.
So if I may, so it's interesting because there was can you guys hear me?
Disturbingly deep.
You guys can hear me? Okay. So there was a I just saw a Pew Research Center poll that said that 67% of people a week after the George Floyd killing support the idea that Black Lives Matter. Okay, 67%, which was the highest they'd ever gotten of sort of all Americans, white Americans, et cetera, to suggest that. For me, that was a big moment, and it meant something. But I also, like you all, recognize how entrenched this notion of white supremacy is in American culture. And, whenever I feel like, we take...
comment on, anybody want to comment on the statues, maybe? Or we wait for Ted to jump in?
No. They can hear me, Clive.
Hey, Clive, we can hear Ted.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't. Sorry.
Yeah. But what I feel like we take 2 steps forward and then we take 3 steps backwards oftentimes. And so every moment of progress I feel like we make, I turn, like I was feeling somewhat hopeful. I saw that Sephora had made this policy around 15% of their shelf space for African Americans. They were trying to sort of build this equity, financial equity piece, and you see all these statues coming down and things like that. And then I turned on the Trump rally last week, and I watched. I couldn't watch the whole thing. I mean, I really couldn't. But I watched probably, 30 minutes of that rally, maybe 20 minutes. And I was sick to my stomach, folks. And I'm not in rooms where people are talking from a white perspective in a racist way very often. I'm trying to figure out what is the mentality that fuels, whether it's Trumpism, that fuels this protection of white supremacy. I think, and I'll say this quickly, I'm a kid of the 80s, right, as I shared. And my parents weren't necessarily overly politically active, but they were very progressive in their own personal life. They did very well for themselves, both of them. My mom was an educator, my dad a business owner. And we lived in diverse communities. I didn't realize we were living in communities that were actually suffering from white flight at the time until I realized later, like we moved in, other people moved out. I never knew that until I got older. But I was hopeful back then, right? I grew up, I was hopeful. And the 90s, I was somewhat hopeful, even though we had some stuff going on here. But the older I get, unfortunately, sometimes I feel like I'm actually getting less hopeful, particularly when I watch what I saw in that rally. And so can you help me understand that? Because I don't.
Ted, he is doing exactly what the plantation owners did, exactly what the industrial leaders in the South did, of pitting poor working class white people against Black people for economic profit. It's the same thing being played over and over again. And these white people are hoodwinked because they identify with his emotive language, especially small town people. And so they want more, they want hope. And his promise of that and the binary it creates works with them.
Connie, what? So obviously, Chicago is a unique situation, right? We have a long history of racial segregation in the city. Explain to me, I was I live by Marquette Park, and Marquette Park is famous because of what happened in the 1960s with Dr. King. Dr. King marched in Marquette Park and said about Chicago that he'd never seen racism as bad in the South as he saw even here in Chicago. It's part of our play. We do this little section on him and that event in the play 1619. Explain to me, do you think Chicago is getting better or worse in this area, Connie?
Oh, boy. There are decades and decades of persistent white enforced segregation throughout the city. It's not as if we can turn that around on a dime. I am hopeful that we have our first mayor in my entire lifetime that I've ever heard talk about segregation and the need to dismantle racist housing policies and the benefits that have continued to accrue to whites in Chicago. So that I am helpful, but it's a long road. Like we're not just done with racism, right? Like this has to be a continuing, dedicated effort. We can't just do if we think about employers and organizations, it's not a one workshop and you're done. It's not a one law and you're done. We have to have the staying power. And I'm not sure Americans have the staying power. We don't even have the staying power to stay home with COVID-19, right? So I do worry about whether or not we've got the persistence to do it or not. Your previous question about Trump and his rallies, a lot of it is the same old Republican dog whistles that we have heard for decades and decades. I am encouraged that there are only 6,000 that showed up, though.
Yeah. Well, we know he didn't get a majority of votes anyway, and I'm sure you could speak to this better than anyone, Connie, about how this works and how we really have minority rule in many ways in our country around how elections work. Diane, you have made some individual choices, because I think that we've got to talk about this from both an individual perspective and a collective perspective. One of the things that frustrates me when I talk to people is that they go, well, I'm not individually racist, or I have not experienced a ton of individual racism. I've got black friends, I've got white friends, I've got Asian friends, etc. We understand that does nothing to address systemic racism, does nothing to address institutional structural racism and inequality that exists. It really is a very simplistic way of thinking that a lot of Americans fall into, right? But Diane, you've done something individually, because I think sometimes, even though that's true, people have to know what they can do individually. And you've done some lifestyle things that I think are interesting. I'd like for you to share about. And then Matt, I want you to share after her, because you talked a lot in our last segment about sort of a personal conversion in this space. And I want you to help other people who might be listening to be able to examine themselves and to experience some of that conversion as well. But Diane, why don't you talk a little about what you were trying to do with your own personal life and how that would impact a larger community change?
Well, I think this starts one conversation, one story at a time, and you have to keep it going some way. But you can't build a base of understanding if you don't live with people that are different than you. And I'm pretty committed. I started following the CCDA concepts of relocation and redistribution about 30 years ago. And I started as just a helps program, as a lot of church programs are. But then I realized, people can go help and then they go home and they do life with people exactly like them. And if you don't live and do life with vulnerable people groups, you have no idea what their life is like. And it's been tough. I mean, we've gone to Chicago public schools. We live in a pretty blended neighborhood now. I mean, I have drug deals in the alley going on all the time. And sometimes that stuff is hard to put up with. But if you don't have some kind of rub, you forget. This up and more model of prosperity is blinding.
It's interesting. I mean, that's a funny comment there, right? But I tell you, Diane, those are the things that I have been in predominantly white spaces for a large part of my life. I've been in very diverse spaces for part of my life. I'm in predominantly black spaces for most of my life right now. And one thing that I have seen very clearly in all of these spaces, that people are self-interested and self-protecting. And so you see this lifestyle segregation, these patterns that are very clear, no matter what group you're in. And so I think it is radical to step outside of that. As an African American working in Inglewood, I didn't grow up. I mean, lived in Inglewood until I was 5, and then we moved out to suburbs, and we moved to more suburban area, and then more suburban area, and kind of lived a very middle class life. But even for me, it took me living and sort of working in Inglewood for 20 years to really begin to wrap my mind around a lot of the dysfunction that we see on the news every day and the why behind it. And to be able to say, my goodness, we see this, and trust and believe, folks, Black people living in these cities are just as terrified of what they see on the news. In fact, I would argue they might be even more terrified, right? But there is a why behind all of this. And I love the work that you do, Connie, around this. I'm going to come to Matt in a second, but I want to come back to Connie and Clive on these issues as well, around these institutional issues that affect behavior. When we are small thinkers, we don't see this. And I think, as I've lived and worked in these communities for years myself, right, coming from a middle class background, we are foolish to not understand and begin to talk about the why behind gang violence, the why behind lack of educational opportunity, the why behind this dysfunctional culture that we see. When we blame people, it is counterproductive, and it does not push us collectively towards a better country. One thing that I'm a firm believer in, and I'll shut up after this, but one thing I'm a firm believer in, we can't run from poverty, people. We have to fix it. And all people, and I think this is a common American aspiration. Everybody wants to, whatever, even regardless of race, whatever race you are, they want to get away from these problems as fast as they can. And for me, it's heartbreaking, because there are millions and millions of folks in our country who don't get adequate schools, who don't get adequate resources. What is supposed to happen to them? Anyway, Matt, go ahead. I want you to talk about your own conversion for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think Diane's exactly right. The proximity and being near and present to people and their stories is important. The second thing for me was reading about the history of race in America, how it developed. I mean, they don't teach you this in grade school. White grade schools don't tell you that it was invented to justify the stealing of land and labor. So you have to demythologize sort of the American story, and that takes work. You have to do the work. And then the third thing, I think, was I read a book called Divided by Faith, written by some sociologists, that talked about how the conceptual tools that white people have are set up to not have to reckon with white privilege and white supremacy. So it's individualistic. So there's this idea of a meritocracy in America, right? You get what you deserve. So if somebody's poor, then they didn't work hard. They're lazy. If there's inequality somehow, that you probably deserve it. You brought it upon yourself, right? And these little narratives, they pop up all the time. When you watch somebody get beat up by the police, your first thought isn't, oh man, that's awful. Their first thought is, oh, I wonder what he did, or I wonder what she did to deserve that. So these little things pop up, and when you begin to be able to name the stories you're telling yourself and identify where they came from, and that they were actually constructed as a part of this edifice to keep whiteness invisible, that was what those three things helped me a lot. So proximity to people, listening to people's stories, and learning. And then reading about the conceptual tools that white people have that are different from other people groups. And then I'll just say one more thing and then shut up. I think a seminal moment for me was when I made a shift from deciding that being wrong about something wasn't the end of the world. Like the best thing that could happen to me is that somebody would show me I was wrong, rather than the best thing that could happen to me was I would be able to defeat everybody who wanted to prove me wrong. I think that posture shift for me, not only in my Christian life, but just as a human, it made me a better human, because I'm just trying to get acquainted with being wrong. And it's actually good news to have somebody show you you're wrong. So those are four things I think that played a big instrumental part of my conversion.
Connie, can you speak for a moment about sort of institutional racism as you do so well? And then Clive, I want to come to you. Clive, can you hear me yet? Or okay, cool, awesome. Okay, yes, I want to loop you in on this as well. So, Connie, go ahead, because I know you probably in some ways, we see these things over and over and over and over and over again. It amazes me how many people don't actually realize that there are very clear historic and institutional reasons why we see the disparities we see. And if we don't deal with those, it is honestly, you have one or two conclusions. Either your conclusions are racist, that people have chosen to live in the kinds of conditions that they have. The average white American family is worth 10 times more than the average African American family. Your conclusions are either there is some sort of institutional, structural stuff going on, or that people are these are the amalgamation of sort of bad choices and behaviors. There's not really much space in between. So kind of give us some of the research information around the institutional issues that we're dealing with.
Right. I mean, race is socially construed, and it's construed in a way to keep whites in power, right? So if we don't see race, then whites don't have all the benefits. And we see it systemically in everything. We see it in our educational system. We see it in our politics. Importantly, as we see it geographically, we see it in our housing policy. And one of the real telling things, and this is where a convergence of politics comes together, and we can see it with what happened with public housing. So public housing was largely funded by our federal government. And when it was built, we can have all kinds of discussions about how it was built in big, tall, high rises and whether that was good or whether that was bad. But they were expensive to maintain, right? So you've got elevators, you've got garbage chutes, you've got windows, you've got all these things that are really expensive to maintain. And the federal government is providing a lot of money for that. But 1950s, 1960s, into the 1970s, we start to see white flight leaving cities. And this is also the point at which Richard Nixon gets elected to the presidency. And it is the start of a new federalism, devolution, in which supposedly power is going back to states and localities. What it really means is federal government isn't going to pay for this stuff. And what the federal government did was they shifted financing from urban city areas to where all the white voters went, to suburban areas, because Nixon figured out he didn't need city voters anymore. All of his voters had gone to the suburbs. So our federal government financed the infrastructure, the water, the electricity, the streets, the police, the fire, the schools, in all these newly developing suburbs, meanwhile stopping investment in cities. And particularly public housing is one that, you could look at tons of things, but public housing is one that I look at. And then local governments are left holding the bag. Meanwhile, local governments have lost a significant amount of their tax base because of white flight, and retail and businesses that have now gone to the suburbs. And cities just couldn't maintain these big, huge high rises because they don't have the revenue from their own tax base. The federal money has dried up. But this is a long way of coming back to the same point that you made, Ted, was we looked at people who lived in public housing. We said, oh, they're just not good people. They didn't take care of the facilities. When the reality is, it was a huge, monumental failure of governmental policy that resulted in people living in deteriorating conditions. And we don't think about that. We're very quick to blame the people that lived there without looking at the larger systemic, institutional, governmental policies that got us into these positions. And we could talk about redlining. We could talk about restrictive covenants. I could go on and on with hundreds of examples that I try to engage my students with. But the fact is, racism is built into all of these systems. And at some point, we've got to go beyond just dismantling the system. And I think we have to have a real conversation about reparations in the United States.
I was going to ask you all about that, and I love the fact that you brought that up, because the question becomes, what do we do, right? If we understand this, how do we repair it? And, reparations is a bad word in American politics. I mean, it really is. It is to Americans, it is such a radical step. It is such a scary step. But the question becomes, when you realize something is broken, what do you do about it? And does that, it's almost like in an individual relationship, if I wrong you and then I apologize to you, which I think we're getting to that apology sort of space now. But then what happens? what do we do, right? What do we do after that? And so we have to talk about reparations. We have to talk about, and however reparations looks, by the way, we can have lots of conversations about that. But if we're okay as a society going forward, Dr. King said something I think is so profound. He said so many things that were so profound, right? But he said we can't continue to have a first-class nation with second-class citizens. And it just breaks my heart that our answer to poverty for most Americans, most white Americans, but then I think, honestly, I think some of the selfishness, I think, and the survival of the fittest mentality that is born in the American capitalist system, I think that some of the minority communities are really suffering from that too, because many minorities I know, their aspiration is to get out of the hood and get away from these problems as much as possible, because they just want to survive too, right? And yet what I see is we as an American society, what breaks my heart is that we don't turn around. It's okay to have a city as beautiful as Chicago and have parts of it that people are afraid to go in, as long as you don't have to live there. That's not acceptable, and it's not right. And I think we are only as strong as our weakest link. But anyway, Clive, hop in on this, please, brother, because I want to give you a chance.
Well, from a Christian perspective, you can say I'm sorry. You can confess what's wrong, which is a good thing. But if you stop there, I think your words don't mean anything. Mm-hmm. But for example, I've seen there's been a lot. Everybody's writing statements right now, and that's great. But it's like halfway through the Monopoly game, admitting it's rigged and saying we're going to unrig it for the next half, but never doing anything about how it was rigged in the first place. Well, unless you go back and do something, I don't know what all that means. But unless you go back and try to undo, or whether it's reparations or something to make restitution, you do not have true repentance at all. And I think that's on an individual, but I think that's on a corporate level. So it means organizations that have historically done that X, Y, or Z, they got to go back and do something about it.
I mean, and I want people to understand this, and there's so much great work about this right here, Ta-Nehisi Coates and Michelle Alexander and so many other wonderful people who've written about these things, right? But I was talking to a student the other day about Chase Manhattan Bank. And we were talking about some diversity policies from the bank. And I began to share with them about how Chase Manhattan Bank draws its sort of lineage, its wealth back 150 years to the ownership of large numbers of slaves on the East Coast of the United States. And so when you look at the wealth today that exists in America, you cannot separate it. Now, they've moved J.P. Morgan Chase. They've had many people sort of buy this. But there's a direct line, direct connection, direct lineage right there to slavery and to wealth being built through that. We cannot, how can you go forward in conversations around inequality and not talk about that and not talk about doing something about it? But anyway, Matt, hop in on this. I'm sure you got something to say here.
Well, yeah, but I don't know how to answer the question. I do think it's a problem to sort of there's something known as white guilt, right? And I what I'm hearing from a lot of Black friends, African American friends, is that they've got white people coming to them with all this guilt. Like, oh my gosh, I realize that culture's racist, I'm racist, please forgive me, as though like one Black person can absolve you of all your sins. But then there's like this easy transaction, right?
We can actually. We have that ability. I don't know if you knew that or not, but we do.
I didn't. This is incredible. I love it.
You learned something today, Matt. You know that?
I did. But what I hear BIPOC friends tell me is like, hey, it's like you want this to be an easy transaction. You want sort of me to say, you're forgiven, don't worry about it, let's be buddies. But we have to repair and rectify like 400 years. Ted, I don't know how America stays America and we actually make reparations. I don't know. I mean,
what do you mean by that?
Well, Eddie Glaude Jr., in his book Democracy in Black, I'm sure you've heard of it and read it. He talks about how Martin Luther King and Obama trade upon America's self-fancying of being the land of the free, and how both of them try to take. So America was never the land of the free; it was the land of the white man, right? but how Obama and MLK almost have this political genius, knowing that they can't actually show America who America is, but they take these statements and they hold them before, white people today and say, live up to your ideals. So it's almost this fake history of what America is, right? Because the ideal never was like women and Native Americans, indigenous people, black people being equal. But you can't say that to white people. Like, that's the problem. Like, we can't say that to white people. Although I'm saying it now. So if you're listening and you're white, this is the truth. So, but Eddie Glaude Jr. basically kind of critiques, I think, MLK and Obama in some ways, and says, actually, that's not the reality of America. Actually, America was never intended to be a free place for everybody. It was intended to be a rigged game for the people who were going to get rich and wealthy and have land. And I think, so I have an imaginative crisis of how do we repair things without deconstructing and dismantling America's mythology about who we say we are.
And I think that, Matt, thank you for that, because I think that strikes at the heart of this vehement, this vehemence, this anger that comes out around these Confederate statues, all these things. When you think about it, okay, so what's the big deal? People are feeling like American culture and the identity of America is threatened by this notion of equality. I would like to believe that those documents on paper can be lived out for everyone and they can apply to everyone. But I think you're right, because there are many, many people of European descent who don't actually believe that or want that. And I think there are many people I know, because I'm in circles with a lot of people in the African American community, who are honestly just kind of done. Like, who just are kind of like, you know what, it's never going to happen. So we either need to leave or we need to figure out how to do this on our own, but we're never going to get justice in this country. And that's heartbreaking. It really, really is. Go ahead, Diana, Kanya.
Couple of things. This whole conversation reminds me of Greg Gandon's book, The End of the Myth. And I started struggling about 15 years ago just with what my cultural identity was. And I think that's part of the fear and the shame. Like, the only identity we really have is white racism in this country. So if you take that away, what's your identity? So there's a lot of internalized fear and shame around that. And going back to a couple of the things, if you tell white people to do the work, because people are trying to get up to speed, like Matt said, they do want the immediate fix, but people don't know what doing the work means. And so you have to give them tangible steps. And I usually try to tell people 2 or 3 things as far as conversation, acknowledging people of color's presence in public spaces, simple little things like that. Just tangible things. And back to the reparations, there has to be an exchange. It has to be financial. It has to be.
Wow. So the statues, right? We talked about this for a second, and we're going to run over. We're about an hour, but we're going to run over a little bit because I really want it. This is so important. I mean, plus it's the internet, so we can stay as long as we want to. But help me understand this. I mean, it is very difficult. Part of me having this talk tonight, I'm trying to figure this stuff out, man. It's heartbreaking. Why is it that Trump can whip up this foaming at the mouth? Like, Matt, no disrespect, you live in Indiana, okay? I used to live in Indiana, right? The first time I was ever called the N-word was in Indiana, okay? Just driving down the street. Someone just yelled out their window. They just started yelling. My family and I were just driving down the street. Now, interestingly enough, let me say this, because I think I want to share part of my story. Yes, I had that kind of situation. And yes, I had, people follow me around stores at various points. And yes, I even had people who were afraid of me in various spaces that I was in. And I could see that very clearly. That was a good chunk of my interactions. But see, I played the game very well. And so I'm the kind of person that whatever culture I'm in, I kind of know how to navigate that culture. So because I was able to do that, I didn't get a lot of racial flack. Now, when I stepped out of that cultural space, I did get racial flack. So I knew how to sort of play in that. But my parents both live in Indiana. One lives in South Bend, one lives in Fort Wayne. My brother went to school in Terre Haute. I went to school in Bloomington for a year. I know Indiana, bro. Okay. And it's not a place, with all due respect to you, you are my brother, man. I love you, and you're doing this. But I don't, bro, that is not one of the first places in the world that I'd want to live in, and would necessarily not, because once you leave the big city spaces and you leave Indianapolis, I don't necessarily feel very comfortable, honestly, driving on these roads and stopping at these random gas. I don't know who I'm walking into, who I'm dealing with, and what they think about me, and I don't know. I've never really felt comfortable in that space. When I travel across the country, we purposely try to find sort of larger chain gas stations, that sort of thing. We're not stopping at these random places to eat and things. I'm not doing it. And so I'm sharing that with you personally. I don't know why I shared that, Matt, but I would love to kind of, you live in the heart of it, and I think it was you, or was it Clyde, that I was very encouraged to hear that there are folks in rural America that are fighting for this stuff. That encourages me. What's going on out there, and what can be done, right? Help me understand. I don't know. Help me understand the Trumpism that exists in places like Indiana and stuff like that.
I think it's fear and the need to control. So I think the white hegemony has been unchallenged and been able to be legislated for so long that white people have had power that they can't see, and they don't know they have it, most of them. And it's being threatened by a whole host of cultural and social changes that are happening. Just upheaval, crazy change is happening. For instance, I grew up on the south side of Indianapolis, which when I grew up was 95% white. It's the largest Chin population in the Midwest lives on the south side of Indianapolis.
Largest what population?
Chin.
Okay.
Yeah, Chin
Okay.
people.
Gotcha.
And so there is white people are scared they're losing power. They're scared they're no longer the majority. And they're looking for somebody to turn their fear into, channel it into anger or power, looking for somebody to blame. I mean, this is why Trump is so appealing. It's not because he's so good looking or he's smart. He's just an angry, scapegoating xenophobe. And white people feel like their fear is legitimated when they listen to Donald Trump. I have good reason to be scared. I have good reason to feel uncomfortable. I have good reason to not trust these people who aren't like me. Because look at this successful, bombastic, confident person. So Trump gives me legitimacy for how I'm feeling, and then I can turn my fear outward into anger. That's how I understand it.
Well, I would add it even a step further, that because of the white hegemony, to be treated, to all of a sudden not be in a position of priority and I get treated equally is a threat. That is threatening, because I don't want to be treated equal. I want to be treated better. I want to have the favor.
I don't know that people can articulate that the way all the highly educated people here can, and that's part of the problem. I'm sitting in central Illinois right now, and I've had some major conversations. And one of the things I tend to do is just agree to disagree because of my lived experiences. And I love doing that, because with political, it's right or left. You have to choose binary. But if you agree to disagree and keep it civil, it's shocking to people. So I've had some good response with that. And then I get to unpack my story of my lived experience. But it's everything that Matt and Clive were talking about, they just can't, they cannot articulate it like you all just did.
True.
So, you know, it's
interesting. The young generation, a little bit.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you say that, Clive. I do. Dr. King again. You know, progress doesn't roll in on the wheels of inevitability. I'm kind of hopeful. Like, I was hopeful for my generation, right? I was born in the 70s. You know, I'm a Gen Xer, and I thought, forgive me, I thought we had come a lot further than we really had. Yeah. And I did. And I mean, you could shoot me for saying that, whatever. I just did. Once again, individually, I have had many opportunities. I have many, you know, when I was living in New Jersey, I had a Vietnamese roommate, a Puerto Rican roommate, an Indian roommate, and a white roommate in 3 years. Okay. Every separately, by the way, not ever together. And I experienced diversity in a way that was beautiful. And I've always had wonderful interactions with people across, you know, most of my interactions with people, no matter what their race have been fine. But that's not America's problem. And that's what drives me nuts about these conversations. It's like, yes, you've been nice to me, and yes, I've been nice to you, and yes, we have friends and things like that. But if you're ignoring what has plagued people that look like me for 400 years, then we're not really friends. You know, it's just, we're not. And I think that we've got to become mature. Diane hit it right on the head. I think education is the key to this. There are so many people who just don't think, and they're using sort of their anecdotal individual experiences as the gospel truth, and it is just not. Whether it's good or bad. And we have a collective problem and a collective responsibility. You guys, please just hop in at this point. If you want to say something, it's on your heart to say, just go for it at this point. I'm very open. I wish I was more encouraged right now. I'm not, and I wish I was. I need you guys to give me some hope. I need you to tell me what we can do. Now, the fact that y'all are we talking about reparations, that gives me some level of hope. But what do we need to do? What can be done? What can be done?
Well, I think for the uneducated people, we have to model this better. One of the things that I go back to is the old visual of Bojangles and Shirley Temple. Mm-hmm. And if you study race relations, like in the 40s, that was the first time white people ever saw a visual of a white person and a black person having fun together. And so I tend to think we have to create visuals for people because, as you well know, the media hasn't done a great job too. And people in central Illinois or rural areas, that's all they have is what they see on TV. And it creates a lot of fear. So I think we need to have visuals. Like, I've done a couple of workshops and I never do it by myself. It's like a lateral whip. I always choose to do it with a person of color to give the white people the visual because they need that.
Yeah. I mean, we could go for Clive. You want to hop in? Yeah, Clive, you're muted. So go ahead. Yeah, Clive, you're muted. Actually,
there you go. I'm a former student who runs a kitchen prep business. And he came to me about a week and a half ago and said, hey, we need to have this conversation about race in our workplace because we're very divided between the kitchen and the back house and office. And so I did a friend of mine, and I invited an African-American friend. We did it together for the same reason you said, Diane, and just try to begin the conversation. But I was encouraged because you're a young business owner. And he asked the staff, everybody, well, what can do? And so things came up about doing pay audits according to gender, pay audits according to ethnicity, where are they getting people, who do they serve? And so I'm encouraged by that. I just don't know if there's enough.
Yeah. What about, Connie, come on, let's talk some public policy here for a second. What about the idea that every American, one of the things that I've been amazed by is that we kind of leave a lot of stuff up to chance in this country. Here we are, you know, one of the most diverse societies that's ever existed, probably, right, in that way. And yet we deal with our diversity through the Rodney King educational model. Let's just all, can we all just get along? Without any real training, without any real preparation, without any real formal education around issues. I think every single American ought to be going through a race and diversity class that looks at the history of systemic racism and things like that. And that does not happen. And so when people don't get it, then they come up with their own conclusions based on what they see.
Yeah. And you summed it up perfectly. And I say that. There we go. I say that we have dumbed down the American public. And in some ways, I fear that this may have been on purpose. We took civic education out of our schools after the launch of Sputnik in 1959. We just now got it back in Illinois about 3 or 4 years ago due to a lot of grassroots lobbying from particularly an organization that I'm involved with, Citizen Advocacy Center, that we were able to get civic education back. But a component of that should also be race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's got to be part of it. We should not have students in my classroom, in a college classroom, where they are just then learning about redlining and systemic racism, along with just learning that we have 3 branches of government. I mean,
don't get me started on that one, Connie.
I don't know, Ted. I think the 2 of us could develop a great curriculum that we can institute all
we need to. We really do, because this is too important to leave to chance. I told someone the other day, and I you guys got to forgive me. I give in to some of these Facebook conversations that I probably should not, when I know I'm getting into. I'm like, I shouldn't even do this, but I'm going to. But, one of the things I said about our current president that is so dangerous is that, we could disagree on policy. There's a lot of stuff we could disagree on, right? I mean, honestly, a lot of African Americans actually liked Trump before he ran for office. I mean, that's probably not sort of. I mean, if you look at even polls and surveys, that sort of thing, he was a popular figure across the nation, in many ways, just because he represented wealth and the American dream and that sort of thing. But what's so dangerous about him? What's uniquely dangerous about him is that this issue is America's greatest sin. It's Achilles' heel. It is the one issue that caused this country to split and have an actual war over. And if you don't get this issue right, I don't care what else you do. If you don't get this issue right, because of what it has done to our country historically, you don't deserve to be in leadership, in my opinion. And that's just me. So, guys, let's go around the room, and why don't you guys give me some final words? Matt, let's start with you.
Yeah. I think in the last, 5-6 weeks, I've just been learning about how much I need to listen and how much I think white people are used to identifying a problem and, without knowing it, centering themselves in sort of the conversation, emotionally centering themselves in how we talk about it and feel about it, and then centering themselves into what to do about it. And I think there's a new capacity that I'm having to learn, and I'm seeing people around me learning, of how to listen without burdening other people to solve the problems you created. So how do we enter into spaces where we learn what we don't know, but then don't tell Ted, okay, Ted, so tell me how to fix racism? Well, I mean, that's awful, right? That's like a rageaholic dad asking a kid that's brutalized for 10 years, how do we fix our relationship? Well, the kid didn't ask for you to have a temper and to take it out on them. So don't saddle them with the thing to fix it. So I'm learning what's my responsibility here, and how do I do something about that, rather than just social media sound off or preach a sermon once a week about it, or come on your conversation to what does it tangibly mean in my day-to-day life, is one of the things I'm actively seeking to learn.
Clive?
As the demographics of America are beginning to change, it hasn't really, it's starting to bubble up, but I think that's going to accelerate. And I think we're reaching a point of urgency, because I think there's going to come a point where those who don't have and have been held down and oppressed, we saw it in the looting and the protests, and not that to equate the two. There's going to come a point where I think we're going to have a fragmentation of America along race lines, and it's going to get really violent and really ugly. But I think I just, unless something happens, 50 years, maybe. No miracle.
Clive, I could not agree with you more. I could not. It's a tale of two cities, right? What happens? I mean, when you've got people who are, this pandemic has shown me something heavily here. This nation is like the Hunger Games in many ways. It's a survival of the fittest model. It really, really is. And you can't leave people in a permanent underclass long term and don't think that something's going to happen. Once again, living in Chicago, many people were appalled that people were tearing up the stores downtown. We love downtown. It's so nice. How long do you think you're going to be able to have complete and total poverty 15 minutes west of downtown and it never, ever touch your little perfect world there? I don't. Okay, I'm sorry. Connie, Diane, go for it.
Wow. I have hope in this next generation. I think these young people have enough generational privilege, and many of them are highly educated. They're not going to let go of this. And I have hope in that. And I also, as a contemplative, people are not taught how to think, let alone they don't know history, because history books are whitewashed. And that's the brainstem formation when you're in grade school. And once again, unless you go to higher education, you don't get anything. So that's your formation. So that is a binary. And also church plays into this, because church is binary. It's right, wrong. And so we've got to think about how we think about things around binary and change our postures.
Connie.
I agree with what everybody has said. I think I do have hope in the next generation. I see it a lot in the students that I teach. And ultimately, we are at a turning point. And Clive says, and it's not just in Chicago, but globally. How long can the United States and Europe continue to dominate when the majority of people are living in really struggling conditions in urban slums throughout the United States? And we see it here in Chicago as well. We cannot continue to have a minority on top and a majority on the bottom. We are going to fragment. We are going to have serious problems. I think we can start. One of the steps, and we can get involved and vote. We have an election this November, and it's also not just about the presidency. Look at who you're electing to your state legislatures. Look at who your person in Congress is. Do some research, educate yourself, take somebody to the polls with you. And what we should be thinking about right now, today, is does your state allow mail-in voting? Are we going to allow everybody to vote?
You guys, thank you so much. Here we are again after another hour and 20 minutes having this talk. And guess what? I still feel like we could keep on going for the 2 hours. I mean, it's like, man, I got to have part 3 and part 4 and part 5. And maybe we do, because we got to get this right. I really appreciate you all. And I don't appreciate you because I think you figured this all out. And that you are, that you're free from this, right? And that this does not impact you. And you're not wrestling with your own stuff in those ways, whatever. But what I respect and appreciate is your hearts and your minds and the willingness to wrestle with these questions and to think. If we could just get everyone to do that in this country, right? It doesn't mean that we're going to have perfection. That's not going to happen. I mean, you're going to say something wrong or do something wrong, or, it just happens. It is what it is, right? I liken it to being a male and trying to figure out and navigate the Me Too space, right? I try to make sure, obviously, that I'm acting certain ways and being respectful and certain, but I may get something wrong, right? Not like seriously wrong, okay? But you understand what I mean. But I respect the fact that, your work, you guys have thought about this, and I tell you, I will choose to be hopeful, and I choose to be hopeful because of what Diane said about young people, and what I'm seeing even in this circle, that we have to do something. And this is not an urban problem. It's not an African American problem. It's not a Latino problem. It's not a West Side problem, South Side. It's an American problem. And we either rise or fall together in this country. And that's what breaks my heart when I watch our current president and some of the other conversation. I just want to grab them by the neck and say, don't you understand? Like, we're in this together, you know? So anyway, thank you all. Thank you so much. God bless you all. And let's continue to work. We got a lot of work to do, guys, but I think we do. We have some signs and some achievements, I think, by which we can have, or through which, and because of which we can have hope. So thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you. Well, everyone, that was Change of Ted Williams. You see I'm getting all sad. I don't know. It's an overwhelming issue, folks. And, you know, I really, really am convinced that if we don't get this issue right in America, we don't get anything right. And so I hope that all of us are working in our own spaces to do this work. It is so important. Thank you all for watching. I hope and pray that you guys will have a good night and that we will continue to fight together. Please connect with me. If I can help in any way, I'd love to do so. Got books and things and plays and references to other things. Oh, we're starting the 1619 online course on Tuesday at 6 o'clock Central Time. So check out the website, tedwilliams3rd.com, under the booking page, and you can enroll for our 1619 online course. So thank you, guys. Have a great night. Remember, change starts with you. Take care.